I used to play the same character over and over. I had already written their story in my head, and when the game didn't go the way I envisioned, I couldn't help feeling a bit disappointed. So I take that character, tweak them slightly, and try again in another campaign, still chasing the same story, still hoping things would turn out the way I wanted. But over time, I realized that I needed to detach. I needed to stop playing characters whose stories were already told in my mind, because it kept me from actually experiencing the game. I realized that I was selfish for expecting the GMs to give me the story I wanted, when I should really have been excited about seeing where the story could go. Once I recognized this, roleplaying became a lot more fun. This was a big shift in my roleplaying journey, but it wasn't the only one. In this video I want to take a step back and look at how my style of roleplaying has evolved. How I started, what changed along the way, and what lessons I've learned. To me, roleplaying isn't just about telling stories, it's also about growing as a player, a storyteller, and maybe even as a person. I've told this story many times before, but my first experience with roleplaying was when I was 8 years old. My neighbors invited me to play, and even though we didn't really know what we were doing, I still remember it vividly to this day. There was this spark of immersion, imagination, and creativity that lit up something in me, and honestly, I've been chasing that feeling ever since. Of course, my first few years of tabletop RPGs weren't what I call serious roleplaying. Back then I mostly used games as a tool for creativity. I used them to make characters, and then wrote stories about those characters. It wasn't until my late teens that I started to actually roleplay. At the time, I didn't think too much about the roleplaying aspect of roleplaying. I played with a small, close-knit group of friends, and we were more focused on character power and cool moments than on deep roleplay. Honestly, I thought the actual roleplaying was kind of awkward. The activity was fun, but I was more interested in making a strong character and getting treasures in-game. But over time, that shifted. The dice rolls became less important, and the role-playing moments became less awkward. I think I learned to immerse myself more. Looking back, I can see how my early approach was more self-centered than collaborative. I treated my characters as a personal creative project rather than a part of a shared story. I even wrote a 121-page backstory for my first Exalted character. Yes, I was that guy. I was so attached to that character's potential arc that I got stressed out when things didn't head in that direction. I didn't see the spotlight, I didn't adjust well to surprises, and if I'm being honest, I probably saw the other players as supporting characters in my story instead of equal contributors to our story. I thought that the best role-playing came from having a deep, intricate backstory. That writing pages and pages of lore meant I was truly invested in my character. But what I didn't realize back then was that I was making it harder for myself to enjoy the game. The more I over-prepared, the more I set expectations for how my character story should play out. And when the game didn't follow that script, I felt disappointed. I think an important reason for why my approach was like this was because I was a creative person with aspirations for becoming an author long before I became an actual role player. I went into the hobby as an author rather than a collaborator. And I probably should have just written a damn book. Another important reason was that I was chasing the high of immersion. It was escapism from real-life pressures and insecurities. During the time I started role-playing, I had recently ended a 2-year relationship and was in treatment for salivary gland cancer. I think the sense of reward I got from playing my character bled through into the real world. I didn't change the way I role-played overnight. There wasn't a single aha moment where everything fell into place. It was a gradual progression shaped by experience, general maturity, and probably some hard lessons along the way. For a long time, I was still playing tabletop RPGs for myself rather than with others. I was attached to my characters in a way that wasn't entirely healthy. There was a lot of psychological bleed where I felt anxious when my character was threatened and I felt rewarded when they were victorious. My characters weren't entirely fictional, they were extensions of myself. This meant that I cared too much about how their stories played out. I wanted specific things for them, and when the game didn't deliver, I wasn't satisfied. But as I got older, I started seeing things differently. I became more socially aware, more confident, and more willing to let go of control. I also started running games myself, and that was a huge turning point. Being a GM forced me to think beyond just one character. It made me focus on group storytelling, pacing, and collaboration. It also gave me a deeper appreciation for how much work goes into running a game, which made me rethink the self-serving intentions I had as a player. Another major influence was my time studying social work. Learning about psychology, sociology, and deeper psychosocial issues probably humbled me a bit. I started paying more attention to the world outside my own bubble, and I developed a more genuine interest in role-playing as a concept rather than as an activity. I started seeing role-playing as less of a personal escape and more of a shared creative experience, a way to explore emotions, relationships, and perspectives beyond my own. I realized that the best role-playing didn't come from idealized characters. It came from being present in the moment, reacting organically, and embracing whatever the game threw my way. I also had a moment of reflection when I played with other self-centered players, people who, like I once did, saw the game as their personal story with everyone else as background characters. Watching them struggle to share the spotlight made me realize that was me, and I didn't want to be that kind of player anymore. Another lesson I had to learn was that playing the same type of character over and over wasn't actually helping me grow as a role player. For a long time I had a handful of character archetypes I kept returning to. It got to the point where some of my friends would roll their eyes when I introduced a new character because it was basically just another version of the same concept, or at least the same shared traits. That was embarrassing, and it pushed me to step outside my comfort zone. One of my favorite characters from recent years was completely different from what I usually play. It was for the Walking Dead RPG, and I played a divorced, overprotective mother in her late 50s, an evangelical Christian trying to keep her teenage son safe in the apocalypse. She was nothing like the brooding rogues I used to gravitate toward. It wasn't a long-lasting game at all, but it was fun playing her. She challenged me in ways I hadn't experienced before, and it reminded me that the best role-playing happens when you push yourself in new directions. Looking back, I can see how my role-playing started as something deeply personal, then gradually expanded into something collaborative. I stopped chasing specific character arcs, stopped pre-planning every detail, and instead started embracing the unknown. And once I made that shift, it became easy not only to get into character, but also to get out of character when I needed to. My role-playing didn't evolve in a vacuum. A lot of outside factors helped shape the way I play today, whether it was the kinds of games I played, the people I played with, or even just the broader trends in tabletop RPGs. One thing that happened only a few years ago was that I started playing in English. Even though I'm close to fluent, I don't get many chances to practice speaking English in my everyday life. Making YouTube videos helps, but they are scripted. I'm literally reading this off a teleprompter right now. But when I roleplay, I don't have that safety net. I stumble on my words, I struggle to emote by doing my native tongue, and that can be frustrating. I think I got better over time though. Role-playing in English challenged me in ways that playing my first language couldn't, and I think it made me a more comfortable role-player overall. Another major factor was online play. Playing in person and playing online are two very different experiences, and each comes with its own strengths and challenges. Online play has been a mixed bag for me. It's practical and it lets me connect with players from all over the world, but it also feels more disconnected. I like the physicality of in-person games, rolling actual dice, reading body language, feeling the energy at the table. Online it's easier for me to get distracted. It gets harder to immerse myself, and sometimes I just lose interest faster. There have also been shifting trends within the modern tabletop RPG space. Role-playing isn't the same today as it was 20 years ago. The industry has shifted towards more narrative-driven play, and immersive role-playing is more encouraged than ever. I think the rise of actual play shows and online communities has played a big role in that. Seeing how different people approach role-playing has been inspiring. Whether it's in streamed games, podcasts, or social media, I don't try to copy what I see, but watching others play makes me reflect on my own role-playing and consider if there's something I could learn. And then there's one of the biggest factors, playing different systems. If I had only ever played D&D or only ever played Exalted, I think my growth as a role player would have been stunted. But branching out to different games forced me to adapt my style. Playing The Walking Dead had me role-playing a Christian mother, something I would have never considered otherwise. Playing Chronicles of Darkness had me play a divorced horror author with writer's block. These aren't characters I would have made if I stuck to the same systems. But trying new games pushed me out of my comfort zone. And honestly, I think that's one of the best ways to grow as a role player. If you find yourself playing the same kind of character over and over, maybe the solution isn't just to tweak them slightly, but to switch to an entirely different game. So, how do I approach role-playing today? First and foremost, I've learned to let go. I don't come into a game expecting a particular story arc for my character. I don't need things to unfold in a specific way to feel satisfied. Instead, I've embraced the spontaneity of role-playing, the unknown, the unexpected, the way a character's story grows naturally through play. And once that story is over, I don't play that character again, unless we decide to pick the story back up. I also don't get hung up on backstories anymore. I used to write these massive, intricate histories for my characters, 121 pages in one case. But now, I don't want them to be blank slates either. I usually start with just a paragraph or two, enough to establish their personality, motivations and a few key relationships, but not so much that I box myself in. I want to discover who my character is through play, rather than having it all figured out from the start. I also prefer to build my characters collaboratively. I am fluent, I promise. Why did I choose this word? I also prefer to build my characters collaboratively now. In the past, I saw character creation as a solo task, but today, I much prefer working with a group during session 0. That way we can make sure our characters complement each other, not just mechanically but narratively. I guess that I don't want to be the brooding rogue anymore. I want to be part of a cast of characters whose stories are interwoven from the start. I can enjoy some inter-party intrigue from time to time, but it should be collaborative and consensual. I become much better at checking in with other players, making sure that the tension enhances the story rather than creating real-life discomfort, and if conflicts do arise, either in character or at the table, I'm a lot more comfortable addressing them openly and constructively. Another major shift is that I've stopped seeing failure as a bad thing. In the past I wanted my characters to be cool, competent and successful. Now, sure, I still like cool moments and nice rewards, but I can get excited when things go wrong. A failed roll, a bad decision, an unintended consequence. Those moments make for some of the best stories. Instead of seeing failure as a setback, I see it as an opportunity. With that approach, I also feel rewarded more. Of course, I still have preferences when it comes to the kinds of characters I enjoy playing. I still love compelling, dramatic personalities, and sure, I sometimes still find myself indulging in one of those special cupcake kind of character that's easy to give a bit of main character syndrome. I'm not perfect, but these days I also love playing flawed, messy and deeply human characters, ones who don't always make the right choices, ones who struggle, adapt and grow. I don't just want to play characters with good backstories anymore. I want to play characters with good arcs. I want to experience change, to see my characters grow organically and to let their fate unfold naturally, without forcing the story in a particular direction. I think it's valuable for all role players to try their hands at running games. Being a GM forced me to step outside my own character's perspective. It made me think about the bigger picture, how to tell a story that's not just interesting to me, but engaging for everyone at the table. When you're a player, it's easy to get wrapped up in your own character's arc, but when you're a GM, you have to balance everyone's arcs. You have to set up opportunities, manage pacing, and make sure each player has their moment in the spotlight. And once I started seeing things through that lens, it changed the way I approached the game as a player. For one, I became much more collaborative. I stopped wanting my character to be the main character, and instead started seeing them as part of a shared narrative. I got better at supporting other players, celebrating their moments just as much as my own, and working with a group rather than treating them as side characters in my story. I also became more flexible. As a GM, you learn quickly that no plan survives contact with the players. And honestly, that applies to characters too. The more rigid my experiences were, the less fun I had. So instead of trying to force a specific arc, I learned to trust the game, let things unfold naturally, and adapt to the moment. My characters became more reactive, more organic, and ultimately more rewarding to play. When I was younger, I saw failure as something to be avoided, something that made my character look weak or less competent. But as a GM, I realized that failure is one of the best tools in storytelling. Some of the most memorable moments in my games have come from things going wrong, and once I embraced that as a player, it didn't feel like I was failing anymore. Everything became a success in its own right. I also think that running games has made me a more patient, adaptable and mindful player. I understand the effort that goes into running a game, so I try to make sure I'm not putting unfair expectations on my GMs. I check in with them, I ask questions, and I respect the time and energy they put into making the game happen. It's something I wish I had been more aware of when I was younger. At the end of the day, I think that one of the best things about this hobby is that it teaches you things. Not just about storytelling, but about collaboration, adaptability, and how to engage with others in a meaningful way. This video has been a lot of me yapping about things I've learned, and it can probably come across as if I think that I mastered roleplaying. I haven't. Far from it. I'm still evolving. There's no point where I can say, this is my final form. Every game I play, every new system I try, every new group I sit down with, it all shapes how I approach the game, and I don't think that's ever going to stop. One thing I know I want to explore more is narrative-focused games. I was raised on crunch-heavy systems, and most of the people I play with still prefer them today. Because of that, I haven't had as many opportunities to really dive into rules-light story-driven games, and I think I'd enjoy them a lot. I want to experiment more with systems that put roleplay and storytelling about mechanics where the dice are secondary to the story being told. I was recently invited to Evil Hat Productions creator support program, and they have a lot of narratively focused games, so I'm curious to see if it acts as a motivator to explore more outside my comfort zone. I also want to play more diverse characters. I've already made a lot of progress here. I don't just play brooding rogues with tragic pasts anymore, but there are still so many kinds of characters I haven't explored. I'd love to play more grounded, flawed, and everyday people, characters who are shaped more by their relationships and struggles than by epic journeys and adventures. I still enjoy larger-than-life storytelling. I'm never going to stop playing Exalted or Machine-Born or other high-powered games, but I also want to challenge myself with other types of stories. Speaking of Exalted, I'd actually like to play it again. For the past decade and a half, I've mostly been running it, not playing it. And while I love running games, I miss the experience of being a player in that world. I'd also like to play my own game Machine-Born at some point. Right now, since I'm the one who wrote it, I'm naturally the one who runs it. But I think I'd learn a lot by experiencing it from a player side, and honestly, I'd love to see more playtests by people who aren't in my immediate circle. Send me an email if you're interested in playtesting it. Looking even further ahead, I wouldn't be surprised if I end up getting involved in an actual play or podcast at some point. I don't have any immediate plans for that, but it's definitely something I could see happening down the line. I think it would be an interesting challenge, role-playing in a way that's not just fun for myself, but also entertaining for an audience and in a second language. Like I said, there is no final form when it comes to role-playing. Nothing stays the same in this hobby. Every game is different, every character is different, every story takes you somewhere else. I'm sure that as long as I keep playing, I'll keep learning and growing. Looking back, I can see how much my role-playing has evolved. What I valued when I was younger, what I value now, and how I got here. And in a lot of ways, I think my journey as a roleplayer reflects my journey as a person. I started out more self-serving and with a tighter need for control, but over time I learned to loosen my grip, embrace collaboration, and put my trust in others. Of course, I still fall back into old habits sometimes, but imperfection is part of growth. But now I want to hear from you. How has your role-playing style evolved over time? What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way? Let me know in the comments. Until next time.